convenience probably was a better way, because Skype was already there. There was no need to further research or investigate different solutions. We knew it was a proven technology, so to speak. We knew that it had a large user base already, so we used the medium. We had the facilities to record the calls, which is how we present the show to you now. And that was the draw towards Skype. I think if we hadn't had Skype, we wouldn't have had any difficulty delivering the show. We just would have had to look elsewhere. And maybe that's the example of why Skype is so valuable to Microsoft, because we knew through marketing, through the large user base, that Skype was already handed to us on a plate, as it were, and we could get rolling straight away. So, I say, we've been using SIP over the last few days. Perfectly acceptable, exactly the same experience as using Skype.
I know your wife has been using that.
Yeah. It's funny enough, yes.
She's not a Linux person.
Yeah, no, I think I mentioned on a few shows ago, I sent my brother away home with a spanking new copy of Crunchbang Linux on his machine. So it was only after we had the conversation with Roy, she instructed her mother to install Linphone on her machine, and they communicate now via SIP between the two of them. So it's a technology. It's exactly the same as Skype to all intents and purposes, in the sense of the way calls are made, and there's very little difference. The only drawback to it, like I said at the moment, is people do flock to Skype, and there is already an established user base.
Yeah.
While I was talking,
one thing I should point out, for those who don't know SIP, we're not talking about an actual application, but more of a protocol. Skype is the only application, or just the only family of applications you can use to communicate with people on Skype. When you're using SIP, for example, myself and Tim were using completely different clients, and we were communicating seamlessly, despite the fact we're using different applications. And I also spoke to different people on the very same day. I probably spent 3.5 hours speaking over SIP. Even with video and things like that. And once you get it to work, and once you learn how to use the program, it should be pretty simple to use, at least on Linux. Actually, this is one of those areas where I suppose if you were to use something that's based on standards, I think it'll be more difficult to test that on Windows than on Linux. And this isn't the only example. All kinds of applications tend to work better in Unix-based environments than on Windows. And the Windows is kind of always sort of semi-experimental. I think Akiga's got a build for Windows, but it's kind of beta version, use at your own risk type thing. But if you do want to use it well, you might as well run it on Linux.
And I think you've highlighted perfectly the thing I was mentioning before about choice and diversity. With SIP, we're not restricted to a particular client, and you're free to roam and still communicate, so to speak. Whereas with Skype, you're, dare I say, locked into a technology and locked into an environment with no real choice to move around. And
you also don't have to register. So if you care about privacy, and one of the things I can tell about Skype, because I've been running what's it called? Well, I've been running some utilities, several of them, to check my network pipes, basically, and what they do. I have to run it as administrator. And it's very interesting to see what Skype's doing behind the scenes, in ways you won't. I mean, apart from the fact that we have this thing called supernodes, which people don't know about, Skype is essentially a botnet. And it's hijacking people's machines to enable communication that's supposed to be more reliable. Now, I don't really think that's necessary, because I've seen SIP achieve the same type of performance, but, and not doing exactly those same malicious things. But the thing I found about these connections, it's like every person's on my list, right? I make direct connection to the person's PC. Now, this might seem reasonable, but considering the fact I'm not even on the call, the fact that it goes into the person's machine, it's a complete violation of privacy. I mean, in terms of practical considerations, if you build an application to communicate directly with the IP address of every person who's on your list, it means that every person is being tracked by any person who's got them on the list, yeah? So if a person wants to phish or to send malware or to hijack the machine or whatever, can very easily get the IP address if you're connected to Skype, which if you're a CEO of some company, you probably should care about. It makes you very vulnerable. Things like that just kind of made me.
Well, I mean, it'll certainly be very interesting to see the future of Skype. I won't be removing off my computer overnight, and I would be very interested to see how Microsoft intends to support Linux and how Linux will be supported. I think Microsoft's got to play a very careful game here, though, with Skype, because my opinion is, from speaking with a lot of users that have facilitated Skype on their machines, is that the whole draw of Skype is that it's free and it's not, there's no intrusive advertising, there's no schemes or any sort of interruption to their phone call process. Now, if Microsoft has bought this with the intention of making a profit from it, which, if I'm right in thinking...
They're going to advertise in it.
Well, if I'm right in thinking, Skype is already losing money, is that correct? I'm sure I read that somewhere. Now,
what I do know, statistics given to me by this person called Satipara, or he's one of the listeners of the show. He did some maths to arrive at a figure that, considering the number of paying customers of Skype, people actually pay for phone calls, I think the price paid by Microsoft was something like $800 for every paying customer of Skype. So that pretty much would mean that they have how many paying customers? Was it 10 million or?
I didn't see that figure, to be fair.
Okay. So they don't have many people actually paying to use that, but they were building an asset in a way. They were building a network they were building a community, essentially. I mean, look at the Huffington Post. They had lots of people syndicated and contributing to the site. Eventually it was sold as an asset, and the writers weren't paid anything for the contributions they made. And this was a case of them giving things for free, and somebody else basically building a network. And I think that's what happens with Skype. That's the price. And I suppose Microsoft eventually kind of foots the bill, because they are the ones to take a loan or whatever to pay for this company and to try and use that to sell more Windows or to sell more Windows phones or whatever. So I don't really mind. I was pretty happy with the news because it gave me a very good reason to kind of get away from Skype, and also given a very valid excuse or reason not to use that. The first thing my dad told me just the following day, and he said, well, obviously you're never going to connect to Skype again. And I was just like, yeah, it's pretty much it. Because he knows I generally would not use that if I didn't have to, but it's owned by Microsoft. I suppose he knows that he himself actually uses Linux, and I installed for him Akiga some months back. And it's really easy, actually. It's easier to install any of the zip clients that you have than to install Skype on any operating system, including Windows. I mean, I should point out that one of the things I have about 4 zip clients installed now, and I'm still experimenting with several of them, especially recording features, which I do have in one of them. One of the things that I found was installing just about all of them. They are actually in the repositories. So installing them, it's just like give the name of the application, and that's it. That's just call write command or tick the write box, and that's it. So one of the things I installed was LinkPhone, which is the application you are using. And then I found out also you don't have to register to make phone calls. You can actually call a person's IP address directly if the person doesn't want to register. And that's also quite a nice feature, because it means that if you're not interested in being registered and identified, you can still from your computer be contacted or make contact with another user of SIP. And that's quite important for people who care about privacy. Any person who thinks that Skype is going to allow them sufficient encryption, given the fact that, as far as I can tell, in Germany the police gets like keys, or maybe it's in Italy, to Skype, and in China Skype is giving logs of all the conversation, the instant messaging in Skype to the government. Things like that. Any person who thinks that Skype is secure communication, she should just throw this notion out the window. It's completely insecure. Especially in certain area where there is sensitivity, it can throw you in jail if you say the wrong thing or kind of plan to introduce democracy or whatever. So,
well, I mean, as Roy was saying, there's a plethora of options in the SIP world, but I settled personally on LinPhone. Roy just mentioned it. Very, very good client. I'm using version 3.3.2. And to all intents and purposes, if you've used Skype for any period of time, you're not going to be bamboozled by looking at LinPhone. It's virtually identical in the way it's set up. It's very intuitive. And like I said before, to all intents and purposes, the experience you achieve with it is exactly the same as one through Skype. So that's certainly one to look out for. I was a bit apprehensive about writing a review or article on it, because it really is a very simple, out-of-the-box application.